let you find your seats. Nice. This is a good group. Well, welcome back to Tell It Like It Was. This is our 13th live presentation here, and like picking up for Paul, starting his stories back, and we have Jan and Jennifer. And so we're excited to learn more things. There's, I think, something in store, which I don't even know yet. I'm excited to find out.
I don't either.
We will help roll that for you. She also brought some artifacts over on the table. She'll describe what those are along with Jody and the photos. And we'll just start telling some stories. I'm excited to hear what you have to say. You ready?
I heard her say that this was a good group. And I know it's a good group because I see Mallinckrodts out there.
That's right. That's enough said.
Or relatives of Mallinckrodts.
All right, so we have Jan Mallinckrodt with us. We have Jennifer Speckhals with us, me Mallinckrodt. Jan, tell us where you were born. Start with that.
I was born in Berger, Missouri, many years ago. And I went to school in Herman High, graduated from Herman High.
So what brought you to Augusta?
Well, for some reason, I went to a fireman's dance, and there was a fireman there by the name of Earl Mallinckrodt. And I came to Augusta after a little while, because I married him, and there I was.
And what are some of the houses that you lived in? Did you always live?
We lived in, when we got married, we lived in, there was a little duplex that Dan Kemner built down there by where Earl's mother and dad lived. And we lived there, and I had a beauty shop on one side. We lived on one side, and I had a beauty shop on the other side, because I'd worked in Washington at the beauty shop, and then when I came, surprisingly, I had a lot of people from Augusta that I did their hair when I was at the beauty shop in Washington. And they kept saying, "You live in Augusta now. Why don't you start a beauty shop over there and we don't have to drive to Washington?" I said, "Well, we'll think about it." And then Dan said, "If you want that one side as a beauty shop, I'll fix it up for you." So he did. He made it into a beauty shop. And I had the beauty shop until Jennifer was born in 1970. Then I gave up the beauty shop. And then we moved to where the Augusta Winery is now, that house there. We built that house. And then I think it was 87 is when we built up at River Bluff Court. And that's where I've been.
Jen, you were in that house on Clay Street. Do you have any memories?
Seem to remember this little girl that lived, grandparents lived next door. A lot of memories in that house. I lived there 17 years. There used to be handprints and footprints down on the, sorry, should talk louder.
Right.
You really can't hear me.
Yeah. I don't know why. It's on. Okay.
It's on.
You might have to pull it off of your, oh yeah.
Just don't choke it.
I wouldn't do that.
But down where the bathrooms are, there used to be my handprints in the concrete down there. Yeah, I lived there 17 years, and then we moved up to River Bluff, and then in 1990 I got married and moved to Marthansville.
And can you introduce your husband, who is here with us tonight?
Dave. This is my husband, Dave Speckhals, for any of you who don't know him. Interesting fact, his mom and dad and my mom went to school together in Berger and grew up together.
And wrecked his dad's car.
And Mom learned how to drive from him and wrecked his car and parked it on the railroad tracks, and my uncle wrecked the motorcycle, and yes, fun stories.
It's an interesting time. I never knew that.
And where did you go to school?
I went to Washington High. I went to Augusta first and then Washington High. Graduated in 1989. Since you had to say I was born in 1970, you all know how old I am.
Thanks, Mom.
Thanks, Mom.
We didn't tell her age, but was happy to tell yours.
Well, some of these people probably know how old you are, because they were here when you were born.
Yeah, pretty sure Nancy babysat for me some time. Most of you know me.
I was just gonna say that my memories in that house was when Jan taught me how to knit in 4-H. She invited us to her house and she had lots of patience with me. 4-H, remember teaching me how to knit?
Oh, yeah. I taught knitting in 4-H. And I had Nancy and I had Tina Grobman. And we had a lot of fun. And we were supposed to make mittens. And we made them. And Tina's one mitten was longer than the other. I don't know what happened, but something happened. They didn't turn out just quite right. But we had a lot of fun. There was one time, wasn't it, a snowfall? And we quit knitting and went out in the yard and got in the snow. Yeah.
So you moved here when you married Earl, and you guys are members at Ebenezer, UCC.
Right.
With my members there. Is there any other community type memories that you'd like to share with us? You know, events in town or parades or festivities?
Oh, the parades were really nice. When I had the beauty shop, Earl and I dressed up as Raggedy Ann and Andy. And nobody knew who we were. We had the float that, what?
We need pictures of that.
I'm sure there
Oh, there were pictures of it, yeah. And it was just so interesting because it was my float, but nobody knew that it was Earl and I as Raggedy Ann and Andy. So we're walking through town as Raggedy Ann and Andy, and we get up into the Legion, and it's time to put this mask off, and everybody said, "Holy cow, that's Earl, and that's Jan." It was kind of fun. Yeah, the parades were fun. The Legion picnics were fun. We always had a good time at the Legion picnics. The fireman picnics, the fireman dances. Of course, the White House Tavern. We always had to go there for a hamburger or a beer or something. Every Sunday night, there was about, how many of us, May, and 5, 6 of us went to the races? Valley Park, right? We went to Valley Park to the races every Sunday night down there, and we had to stop at the White House Tavern and mix the gin bucket. Yep, we had to have that gin bucket to go down to the valley and then down there and back. And at that time, you didn't, you could do it. So.
So you're saying that we can't anymore?
I wouldn't take the chance because I'm not sure you'd get by with it. But
Well, since we have Alan in the audience, you brought up the White House Tavern. What was one of your favorite memories? And then we'll ask Jen.
at the White House.
Besides your burger and beer.
Well, there was times in the winter time when it was really cold and we didn't know what to do, and there was Fritz Grobman and I think it was Bud Shard and they would call me and say, hey, come on down and play pinochle. And they had the stove there, and we'd sit there and play pinochle. And that was a good time. We had pinochle. But there was, I don't know. And I worked at the White House. I worked for Kathy and Alan for several years. We had some very good times there. Very good times. What about you? What about the White House down with you?
It's a place to hang out every Friday and Saturday night.
You have memories. Dig up
Go
a
there
couple.
after school, get in trouble when I got home because I'd been at the tavern. It's not a place to stop after school.
But you could, because it's a family tavern.
Yeah. So, yeah, a lot of memories of that, a lot of memories of a lot of people in this room being in the tavern. A lot of times I got quarters to go play the jukebox or just go play games and leave everybody alone.
So Jan, where are some other places that you worked in town?
Jody, the better question would be what places hasn't she worked? Okay, so you know.
Okay, well, I worked at the White House Tavern, I worked at the Willowbridge Inn, I worked at the Fudge Shop, I worked at the Augusta Wood Shop, I worked for,
You worked for the bread shop.
I worked for the Cookie Jar and the Bread Shed, I worked for the Copper Shop.
Mr. Burkhoff.
Mr. Burkdorfer, I worked for him. I worked for Mount Pleasant. I worked for Tony at the Augusta Winery. I started out with him. And now I help Ellen out at Centennial Farms. That was the Augusta Wood.
Right, that was your.
Yes.
Okay.
You worked for the.
Oh, well, yes, I worked for the funeral home, Pittman Funeral, or Pittman Funeral Home. Been there for 28 years.
So that was your longest job?
I
Was that
think so.
Pittman?
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to ask what your favorite was, but what was your favorite?
Oh, boy, that's a hard question because every one of them was unique in their own way.
Yeah.
You know, you learned, you know, at the White House, there would be people that came in that you would develop a relationship with, and they'd come in every week or every other week, and you'd see them and you'd talk with them. When I worked for the Augusta Winery, it was the same way. People would come in and it would be the same people, and the wood shop was unique. There would be people that come in that I'd seen, they'd been there before, and they'd come in if I work. And I just worked whenever Ruth Ann and Vic wanted a day off or a vacation. Then they'd call me, but they were all unique. I don't know whether I can really say I've got a favorite one that I had.
And they're all unique in their own way, is actually just sums it up, and I was just kidding. But, I mean, I think that speaks for the town anyway, is that there were so many unique things here, and that you got to be a part of many of them, so that's pretty neat.
Yeah, it was good. I enjoyed working at all of them.
That's good. So, what other, we know that you were on the church board at Ebenezer, and
I still am.
Yep, and I've seen you while the beef dinners, right? Yeah. So that's newer to me because I'm working over at Christ Lutheran. So I do love that, though. I love being able to walk in and just see familiar faces, like
Right.
you said, and that we're all a community and we're helping, feeding everybody, and good conversation, a smile, a handshake, and so you're a part of that as well.
Right. Yeah.
So getting on to the Mallinckrodt side of things, just chatting briefly about Earl and his life here in Augusta. Do we want to start going through some of these pictures maybe and talk a little bit about Earl's heritage here in Augusta?
Yes, we can do that. We kind of thought we'd start with Conrad Mallinckrodt, which was Earl's grandpa. And they had this farm
And where's this farm located?
on the Augusta Bottom Road,
Right before Shell, right? Correct?
right after Shell. Right after Shell.
Yeah, depending which way you're going.
Yeah. These are the buildings below, and then if you look at the top, there is a house up there that is deteriorating. I don't know why Earl never wanted to fix it up, but he never did. People would ask about it, and he'd say, nope, I don't, I'm just going to leave it alone. And I don't know why he never wanted to fix it. And I guess it could be fixed now, but I think you kind of have to be a millionaire maybe to really get there and do some work on it.
What timing is that picture? From what?
Actually, it was last winter. I literally took the picture last winter.
Oh, you took it?
Yeah, I took it because it was actually, you could see the house, and you could only really see the house when the leaves are not on the trees.
Okay.
And it just caught me, it was a pretty snowfall, and it just caught me as it was a really pretty, the red tractor or the red truck in there is just a really pretty picture.
Do you know what year that house was built? I mean, we're dating it back, but does anyone know the year?
It's somewhere in that book, and I have not looked that far back. I can tell you that right above the barn there, Jody, on the left side of that picture, right side of the picture, furthest that way. Go up, come this way, a little further, a little further, a little further, right there.
Right.
That's the original part of the house.
Right.
That right there is the original part of the house, was the law offices of Cornelius Mallinckrodt. Cornelius and Julius and Emil came over from Germany. Conrad.
Conrad, Julius.
So that was the original law office for the town of Dortmund. Back in somewhere in the early 1800s when they came over.
For the 1830s.
Yes.
Was it 1830s?
Yeah.
Yeah. That was a plein air picture. The gentleman who, I can't think of his name, Craig.
Thomas, isn't it Thomas?
Yes. He stayed with Anita for 10 years. And every year he painted something for her. This was the last one he painted. And Hubie gave it to me because it was the only thing from that house I wanted when she passed away.
Very nice.
So it hangs back in its original spot in that house today. For those of you that don't know, I own Anita's house. We do. I think that is from where your picture is taken from, is where the original law office was, across the living room into where you see the kitchen. That would have been the main living room of the house, and the addition to the house that was built on when Conrad married a woman with X amount of kids, and I think there was 14 total that lived in that home at that time. And I have pictures. There was 2 of them that died, so 9 survived. There's a cemetery on top of that hill. This is the tombstone of Mary Mallinckrodt. She was Julius's first wife. Julius lived in what is now Trey and Melissa Smith's house. But that originally, the old shell house, was originally Julius's home. And when she passed away from, I think, scarlet fever, they buried her in that cemetery. There are 3 graves in that cemetery, and none of them are true Mallinckrodts. She married one. Frederick Walks is in there. He married one of Conrad's daughters and got killed, stabbed to death down at the saloon at the old riverfront in Augusta. 2.5 months after they got married.
Oh, wow.
It's some sort of family drama thing. It's all in Anita's book. It really talks about it. It's interesting. And then she married a minor Sagan. So, and then I'm not sure who the other grave is up there. It's Theodore and Carolyn. Theodore was Cornelius' son or Conrad's son? He's my dad's grandparents. These are my dad's grandparents. Conrad's son. These are Dad's grandparents. That would be my grandparents. That would be my dad's parents, Helmuth and Margaret, who lived in the little house next to Pittman Funeral Home when they got married. 2 of my aunts and 2 uncles were born in that house. He had the butcher shop out of that house and out of the Augusta Wood next door. Dad's sister Audrey is the only one left alive, and she can remember delivering meat from the butcher shop on bicycles. Her and her sister Hazel delivering that in town. They had a cooler on the front, and that's how they delivered the meat. They moved out to the farm. What year it was? 30, 32? Pretty sure it was 31 or 32. My dad, who is in the center of that picture, above my Aunt Audrey, the little blonde. Next to him would be Stanley, and in the front would be Chester and my Aunt Audrey and then my Aunt Hazel. Chester died in 1940. Dad was born in 35. Dad's the only one of those 5 that was born while they lived at that farm, and he lived out there 17 years before they moved to town. This is after Chester passed away. Dad's in the middle of the front. Hazel's on that side, Stanley's in the middle, and Audrey's on this side. I don't know what year that was taken, but it's after 1940. That's a catfish. 58-pound catfish called by Rupert Mallinckrodt. Rupert and my grandpa were brothers. Rupert owned the first.
He owned the tavern up here on the corner.
Is that Sharp Corner?
Yeah, Sharp Corner. When Helmuth went up on the hillside, that's okay. When Helmuth went up on the hillside, then Rupert went. They broke up on the farm, but he went on the hillside, and then Rupert went into the tavern up there, or the tavern.
This is a picture from a sign that hangs in the Augusta Wood, and it talks about how in April 4th of 1921, the town of Augusta issued a butcher license to the Mallinckrodt brothers, Helmuth and Rupert. Helmuth and his family lived in the house on the other end of the block at Public and Walnut Street, which is the bed and breakfast that sits right next to the funeral home. During the 1920s and early 1930s, the Mallinckrodt brothers meat market was a meeting place for their family. Having learned barbering in World War I, Helmuth cut a lot of the family hair outside of his shop. Owning a rare shortwave radio, Helmuth and Rupert in the early 1930s invited family members who had been educated in the German language to come by the shop to hear the overseas radio broadcast by Adolf Hitler. The reaction, that Australian doesn't even speak German, we can understand. By 1928, the town's fire insurance map shows that the garage and the woodshed had been added to the meat market structure. On a side note, my dad worked in that garage when he was younger, when it was actually a garage. And we do have some artifacts from it somewhere at home. The Mallinckrodt brothers operated the meat market until 1933, when Helmuth returned to the family farm and Rupert became a cook at the Klondike Sand Quarry. In the early 1940s, Rupert was in the shop again, this time opening as a tavern. The top picture was Grandpa's butcher block. We found it at the farm. As far as I can tell from what Audrey had talked about, she can remember this butcher block Grandpa built and is at least 120 years old. We're not positive what the wood is. I've heard orange, I've heard oak, I've heard walnut, I've heard hickory. Nobody knows for sure. I just know it's very tough to sand. As you can tell, I redid it. I added on the very bottom shelves on the bottom to keep it steady and sturdy so it didn't fall apart because it was really wobbly. Other than that, I did not change any of it.
Where is it now?
Getting there.
We're getting there.
Oh, okay.
This was in the garage at Anita's. I did it all winter. I refinished this. And when it was all completely done, it is now in the house as my coffee bar. But it is a big piece of history.
It is.
That fits very nicely in that one little corner.
You can even see the cutout there of the.
Yeah, the niches. I didn't.
On the left side there?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the original nails are in it. The cut marks are in it. Yeah, that was a fun project.
That is very nice.
That is my grandpa's tractor.
Bill's last name?
Ferris.
Bill Ferris owns it now. Grandpa bought that brand new, and Dad would never get rid of it, though he never drove it. It sat in the one barn the entire time I grew up, and I was never allowed in that barn because I couldn't go near it. It is it kerosene and gasoline or something is how you have to, I mean, it's really an interesting thing the way you have to start it. Yes, you have a video.
Bill Ferris just recently acquired interest?
A year, about 2 or 3 years ago.
About a year or two ago.
Right after Earl passed away.
How's it start? It depends on how many people watch. Yeah, I hear that. Here's the truth.
The other way around.
This is a 1937 John Deere.
1937 John Deere Green.
John Deere beef.
How's it start?
The interesting thing about that is, it was up in this one shed up the farm. It was dug. It was so deep in the ground that I don't know how those guys ever dug it out. I mean, it was so deep in the ground. And one day, we went up to the farm after Earl passed away. We thought, well, we'll go in that shed and we'll look around. And we got in there. Jennifer crawled in the window. We couldn't get the door open. So she crawled in the window. Oh, she said, Mom, there's a ladder in here I want. There's this I want and this I want. And I said, okay, well, we'll get it out. We had the gator, didn't we? Okay. And she said, I don't know if I'm going to get this out of here we might have to come back after we get the doors open. Well, she said, Mom, how do I get out of here? I said, I don't know, but you better start doing something, because she was down in there and there was really nothing to get her to get up out of that window. I don't know how you did it, but she did get out of there.
The ladder that you wanted.
Yeah, I sat there and I said, oh, well, I guess we're going to have to get somebody to knock the door down or something to get her out of there, but we got out. And the other interesting thing about it was the butcher shop, where the butcher shop was, Earl's dad worked there, Earl worked there in the garage, and that was the Augusta wood, and I worked there.
And I think I worked there a couple times. I think I might have come over and watched the shop once or twice when you guys were out of town and everything, and Vic needed somebody. Maybe.
Okay. And then, so then, Earl worked in the butcher shop. He also worked as the postmaster there. You want to elaborate some about Earl's different occupations over the years?
Yeah.
Oh, sure. High five.
Well, when I was going out with Earl, he was working for Mallinckrodt as a farmer. He worked for him. And before he worked for Hubie, he worked in St. Louis for Pet Milk. And then he stayed down there with his sister and he worked for Pet Milk. And then he came out here and he worked at the garage. I think he worked for Jim Bear and I don't remember the other guy. And then they needed somebody to carry mail, and Mr. Wally Marr was the regular mail carrier. And he asked Earl if he would consider being his sub, and Earl said, yeah, he would sub. So Earl subbed, and we had planned on, we were saving our money, we were going to Hawaii. And Wally Marr passed away. So Earl got the job, or he was then the mail carrier, and he had had to carry the mail, and then it was quite a rigmarole of trying to get him to get to be a permanent mail carrier. I mean, at that time you went through either you were Republican or Democrat, or if you were the wrong party, you did not get in, or whatever. And it was just really lucky that Mrs. Meyer, Wally's wife, had some pretty good pull with some politicians. And Earl at that time you had to take an exam to get the job. And he took the exam and he had the highest score. But there was a little bit of political stuff that wasn't right in there yet. But anyway, he did get the job. And he carried mail for 31 years. And it was very interesting with him carrying the mail. In this book here that Anita wrote, it says in there that the mail was always delivered. And I'm not knocking any mail people. Don't get me wrong there. But it says in there that the mail was always delivered. It might have been late, but it was always delivered. And he worked at where the visitor center is now. That was the post office what he started out in. And then he went over to what the jail is now the post office. And he would deliver mail. He got one time they talked about it, when he retired, they talked about how he delivered the mail to Grandpa Buck, Augusta, Missouri. And they wondered how did Grandpa Buck, who was Grandpa Buck, and how did they ever get the mail? And it was Grandpa Buck Hager, and he got his mail. And he never had chains. He always had regular tires, snow studs. He never had any chains. And in this article, Anita was saying that, it was very difficult because when the wintertime, when the snow came, the snowplow would push that snow up against the mailbox, and you couldn't, he'd have to go by because there's a big pile of mail. So one winter he came home and he said, "Put your boots on." I said, "What am I going to do?" "You're going to ride with me. You're going to deliver mail." All right. I delivered mail. And I would sit on the passenger side, and then I would jump out and I'd put the mail in the box. Well, let me tell you, by the time I got home, I didn't feel my feet. But the best part about it was always kind of nice. We'd get done and he'd say, "Come on, let's go over to the White House and get a hamburger or a bowl of chili." So that's what we did. And he carried mail for 31 years. And then he retired.
But you only got to help him 1 year.
I think it was 2 years. I got to help him 2 years because then the post office decided that nobody else could be in the mail car with him. And I said, "It's my car." We own that vehicle. "Well, as it's a mail car, it's a mail car. It's a government car." I said, "Okay, I guess that's what you got to do then." But anyway, and then he retired after 31 years, and then he cut grass. He cut the town grass, the park, the church, and sometimes some of the neighbors. He cut their grass. And did odd jobs around town. He was a street commissioner for a long time. He would go, that was another interesting thing that I always got kind of into. He'd come and he'd say, "Come on, I'm going to stripe the streets." And I said, "Okay, come on, you push the broom and get the dirt all out of the way, and I'll take the thing and roll along." And I thought, okay, that sounds like that. I got the wrong deal here. That's all right. But it was fun, and then the other interesting things about was when he'd cut the grass down at the city park, all of a sudden, here he came walking home. I'd say, "What's the matter?" "I'm stuck. I got the lawnmower stuck down there. Come on, you got to help pull me out." Well, then I'd have to get the gator and go down there and pull him out, but I never could hook the chain right. I never could do that right, but we got out anyway. So. And then he was on the cemetery board, and he was sexton at the cemetery for, I don't know how many years he had that job. Well, until he passed away, actually, and that was a long time.
And he also was on the fire department.
Yes, he was 50 years on the fire department. He was fire chief. And the joke around here is some of you firemen, I know this, he was fire chief when he was 17 or 18, is that right, Bob?
I don't remember.
He was fire chief before he could drink.
Oh,
He was, I think he was fire chief at 17 or 18. Because the old joke was, they had fire conventions, and they'd go to fire conventions. Well, Earl couldn't drink, because he wasn't old enough. But, I think he probably got some drink somewhere along the way. But, and then he went overseas. He was overseas for almost a year. And then I think Dickie Ballman was the assistant fire chief while he was gone. And then when he came back, he was fire chief. So he was involved in the fire department for 50 years. And he told me that he was going to get off, and he was on the fire board, and he helped build the new station out here. And he told me when that was completed, he thought he'd give it all up. So, and when he was fire chief, or when he was on the fire department, we had these fire phones in your house, you know, and the fire would go up, the phone would go off in the middle of the night, and out they go. So we are blessed with a good fire department and got lots of good firefighters here. Volunteer too, so.
now you said he went overseas, and did he serve?
Mm-hmm. He
And
served
what
over,
branch?
what can you do for your country? What was that, Kennedy?
Okay.
Oh, the same?
Kennedy called up, Dad was part of the Air National Guard. Good morning. During National Guard, was National Guard for 4 years. In 1962, he was part of the largest call-up of National Reservists.
That was Berlin.
Right.
Yeah, it was Berlin. It was, Dad was part of Operation Stair Step. He was stationed over in France. I knew nothing till after he
Yeah,
died.
they took the guard
Yeah.
from France and flew airplanes out of there.
Yeah. They were part of the Berlin Wall stuff. And Dad was called up for Air Force for a full year. So when he passed away, he always left it up to me whether he got a military funeral or not. It was my choice. I can't say he wasn't proud he served, but he never stood up on Veterans Day because he wasn't in a war. In his mind, he came home, his friends didn't. So to him, he was not a veteran.
Oh,
So when he died, he did get his military funeral.
okay, good.
And the morning we actually buried him, Dad flew in B-17s. Some of you know what a B-17 bomber looks like. The morning we got to the cemetery, it was misty and raining, and we got out of the car, and my husband is a really good airplane person. I heard an engine noise, and I just kind of looked at Dave and I said, "Is that what I think it is?" And this B-17 flew right over the cemetery.
This was a coincidence or planned?
No, this was coincidence, complete coincidence, because the air show wasn't for another week in St. Louis. This was the Red Raider B-17, came in early, flew right over the cemetery. So we got a flyover and a military.
Yes, he did. Oh, man.
So there's a picture of you guys at Christmas.
This was Christmas. This was down in Arkansas.
Did you have family down there?
It's when I lived down there.
When you lived, so you lived down there for
Yeah, I
how long?
lived in Arkansas for 8 years.
8 years? What brought you down there?
A guy I went to high school with, a couple years older than me. He was my oldest son's godfather. And he lived down there, and he had a friend. You know how that goes, right? Yeah.
I'm in Missouri.
Yeah, so he had a friend. Thought he should set me up on a date with him. Yeah, 5 years later we got married.
And then what brought you back to Augusta?
We got divorced.
Okay.
And Mom and Dad were getting older, and I wanted to move back home. It just happened to be that he just didn't come with me, but I've been back home for 10 years now, so.
Good.
What are some of your fond memories just growing up here? I mean, we talked about the White House Tavern, but
It was a town, and kind of still is in some ways. They never had to worry about me. Of course, where we lived in town, out the kitchen window, they could see me at the square. They could see me pretty much anywhere in town, but there was no crime. Everybody knew everybody. I can fondly remember walking home and needing to go to the bathroom before I got all the way home. And Doris Hopen wouldn't let me in because she wasn't sure who I was. It's kind of a funny thing. But I would stop at Doris Hopen's house, or I would stop at Strookoff's house, Ann's mom and dad's, because I couldn't make it all the way home from grade school. It didn't work.
did you participate? Oh, go ahead.
Everybody knew me in
Yeah.
town. I couldn't get away with anything.
No, probably not.
No, not even the time I took Dad's car for a joyride.
I got caught once like that too. So.
Yeah, but you weren't driving a government vehicle.
That tied it all back. Yeah,
That was a little worse. The
last picture I have on here is the one of you two together that we had in the beginning.
Oh,
So
okay.
that's the end of the true pictures. So,
We'll leave it right there.
Yeah, fond memories.
And then you had a job at the Washington Lumber Yard, correct? How long did you work there?
I've been there now 2.5 years. My first job was Elijah McLean's in 1985, 4 weeks before it burned.
Where was that?
Elijah McLean still sits on the riverfront over Washington.
Oh, okay.
It's a big, huge white house that sits there.
Yes.
And it burned. The kitchen caught on fire. So I went to work for Pizza Hut. Worked at Pizza Hut for 12 years. I had on and off jobs. I worked at Town and Country Lanes for a lot of years. I worked at Magnet. I worked here in town at Old Mill Crafts when Betty Beatty had the craft store. The Mud Dauber's Nest, which was across from the Augusta Winery now. The Augusta Winery. I babysat for hanging up my grandkids from next door once in a while. Spent a lot of time out on the farm. A lot of time out there.
She never wanted to spend any time in the kitchen with me.
Oh.
She had to go on the farm where the bullies were and help feed them and crawl around and come home smelling like a bully, but that's okay. And now she can really cook. And I said, where'd you get that from? You didn't get it from me. Did your dad and you cook up at the farm? Because you didn't get it from me. No, she was her dad's. She was up there at the farm all the time.
You're right, 1832 is when the farm, I don't know why I just thought of that because it's in this book. 1832 is the oldest single-family owned farm. Because the Mallinckrodt has owned it since 1832 and we are all descendants all the way down.
Everyone who's lived there, all descendants.
Yes. It went from Cornelius or Conrad to the next generation, to Theodore, to Helmuth, to Dad.
Do you have any hopes in the
us.
future of what will happen with the home, the farm?
I have a child who would like to someday, but he might want to figure out how to get a job.
Start there, I guess.
Start there, yeah. Yeah, be able to afford it that way.
Yes.
I don't see it, unless they choose to sell it, I don't see it leaving.
That's good.
But once I am gone, I am the last Mallinckrodt that will have owned it. Because the boys are blood Mallinckrodt, but they don't carry the Mallinckrodt name.
Great.
And that's,
acreage do you have there?
There's only 11 acres of the original farm left. Dad sold 40 off before he died. And there was at one time 420 acres total, including all the bottom land that was sold to Ray Myers, September of 1990. The same night my oldest child was born.
Was that the total amount of acreage?
Including the farm, the house, the 40 acres that were there, and all the river bottom land, because when the farm was founded in 1932, the river ran right there, where the bottom road is now. And as the river receded, the land grew. And that's what they owned all the way out to where the river was.
Bonus.
Big bonus.
Yeah, big.
And the property Anita's property was in that was Mallinckrodt's originally too. Which Julius owned that. And the other night, I don't know if anybody's here from the town board meeting, the other night something was brought up about the oldest winery.
You were there.
They talked about the oldest winery. Laura, you were there. The oldest winery around here?
Sat at my driveway.
Sat at the driveway there. There's the Mallinckrodt, Julius Mallinckrodt had a winery. He started a wine cellar there.
Wait, where was it?
Right at where the driveway, where you come to that corner of Shell Road where Anita's driveway is, it sat right there. It was still there when we were little. That brick house that sat right there was the original winery of Augusta.
Was that a 3-story brick building?
Yep,
Seems to me like it was in 1867 on that one.
yep. There's a picture of it in here. Boy, you know what it is. Were you a frequenter of that winery?
We could never find it either.
Is the cellars, did they cover the cellar up?
Joe Strigo told me the house fell in. And so that it's all covered up and it is actually still there. It's just all covered up.
We're talking about 65 years ago.
Joe also told me there were 13 original wine cellars in Augusta. I own 2 of them. Because there's a wine cellar at that house. The original law office had a wine cellar right below it, and that wine cellar is still there. Well, you can't get down into it, but it is there.
All right. Does anybody else have any questions from the audience?
Well, I kind of wanted to hear about your stories, Jody.
Oh,
Jody's grandparents, Wanda's mom and dad, and lived next door between Fraser's house and our house. My best friend growing up lived in Fraser's house. We are still friends to this day, but he was my best friend, and I've spent a lot of time at Hager's house or at Harvey and Autumn Paul's. The older I got, the more I was not so sure I liked Autumn Paul. Because she could call mom the next morning, do you know what time your daughter got in last night? But when Jody and Cindy, and then later Jessica, when they would come over, I would have to go over and play with them.
she was just enough old enough to where it was a great babysitter, right?
Right.
So my mom would come up from Defiance and spend, summers canning hours on end in grandma's basement and, go outside and play. And so Jennifer, there used to be, did we determine that was
It was an apple tree, it's an apple tree.
So there was an old apple tree that now sits where Augusta Winery's big, huge building is. At the corner of that property, there was an apple tree, and that was such an old apple tree that the branches grew, and I guess they were maybe heavy with limbs and flowering, apples, that they touched the ground. And so it made this little canopy for us to play in. So, we played house under there, and this side was our kitchen, and this was our living room. And so, lots of imagination. I don't know how much kids really do that anymore these days, so that's one of my fond memories of playing with Jennifer.
In one of those times of the imagination, I had a bag out and we were playing with dolls and everything. And I gathered everything up and I went back in the house, I put it away, and then later that afternoon, Mom had a headache, and she was on the couch, and Dad was mowing grass. And I went to move that bag, and something slithered out of that bag. And I screamed and ran to the living room, and Mom informed me that I was wrong. There was no snake in the house. I was imagining it. Please go clean my room. And I am in the hallway just crying because there is a snake in my room, and I am watching it. I go, now, Mom, there is a snake. There is not a snake in your room. She got up off the couch. She came walking back. She seen the snake and yelled, "Go get your dad." So I go running outside to get the person on the lawnmower who informs me also there's no snake in my room. We go in. By this time, the snake is now moved. So now we have to move all the furniture. It was a garter snake, this long, but it looked this long.
Well, we just surmised it crawled in her bag. You know, she laid the bag down, the clothing bag down, and it just crawled in and came on in. But it wasn't a very big snake, but it sure gave us a thrill.
That made me feel nice to know we were playing around with snakes.
Well, if there's nothing else, there is some things over there on that table. There is Conrad's passport. It's in German. I can't read it, but it's in German. And it's a very big, hold it up, that's a very big passport at that time. Conrad's telescope is over there. Conrad was a justice of the peace, and his little seal that he would seal things with is over there. Now Conrad was justice of the peace. Julius was a orchard guy. He had vineyards and thousands of apple trees. He was a agriculture guy. And as it is, there was Julius, Conrad, and Emil that came over. Everybody asked me about Emil because Emil was the one that started Mallinckrodt Chemical in St. Louis. And my answer is I have not gotten a check from that place. Have you, Phil?
No, I just tell them I'm from the poorer side.
Leroy, have you gotten one? Well, you work
I
for
got
Mallinckrodt.
a check because I work for them.
You work for Mr. Okay. Let me see. There's a picture there of the Mallinckrodt reunion.
Yes.
The big Mallinckrodt reunion we had, and I forgot the year. I wrote it on the back of
It
it.
was a year that, it was either 93 or 95.
95.
Was a flood, 1995. There's a big picture of that that's taken right outside here. There's some books there. The one book is very fragile. I have a rubber band around it. But there is in there when they sold things for a dozen eggs for 5 cents.
Back in the late 1800s.
Yeah, late
It's from
1800s. And when we had the big flood, when we had the big reunion, we had Mallinckrodts from all over the world. They were all over the world here. We had it right here, and Anita did a wonderful job of organizing everything. The bad part about it is we had the flood. And we were supposed to have trips to Herman. Since I was from Herman, I was supposed to lead a bus trip to Herman and show them around Herman, and we couldn't do that because we couldn't get to Herman. Hubie had the tour around town here. He took them up around the farm and all around town here and talked about different things. And then the trip that was supposed to go to Herman went to St. Charles. We went down to St. Charles and did that. And then one day we went down to the Mallinckrodt place in St. Louis, and we went to the university where Danford and that we went all down there, and it was a very, very good reunion. It was a beautiful job done by Anita. And let's see, I think that's all. Well, the coat of arms is over there. And the other thing of this is we would like to give that to the Historical Society, because I don't want it anymore. Jennifer doesn't want it. So if the Historical Society would like to have that, they could have it.
We would love that.
And that's pretty much all of that. The book.
Oh, all of it?
All of it.
Yeah, we have it all.
Thank
We can have it all.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
Said it has a history with
Yeah,
Augusta.
oh, it
deserves
sure
to be.
does.
That way it will be preserved and kept and you know.
Yes. We'll have to-
we didn't even know we had some of that.
Really?
Yeah, that book, the book from the 1800s, we didn't know we had it. None. Mom and I found it a couple weeks ago and started
Really?
looking through it when we were looking for stuff for this, and it was like, oh, holy cow, there are relatives of everybody in this room listed in
We're
this
related
book.
to everybody almost.
When they bought stuff, I mean, it's listed in there who bought what and who bought this and who bought that and who owed for this and who owed for that, and it's fascinating.
I think I know the
Where
right
did you
spot to
find
put it.
these things? Were they?
Dad kept them. My non-pack rat father had all his stuff from when he cleaned out, I'm guessing Grandpa and Grandma's basement. Grandpa and Grandma had it from when they cleaned out the house, and it just got passed down through the years.
Some of it, the telescope and that little,
Yeah.
that thing came from Anita. Anita brought that one day to Earl and said, I want you to have this. Because you've got you got Jennifer, she might, and maybe it could be left in the house up there or something. So Anita had, yeah, the telescope and that little thing. Yeah. The interesting thing we found, and I don't know if anybody in this room knows this, but we found a ticket. I think I said something to Rob Seam about this. We found a ticket that there was an Augusta anchor mill. Does anybody know anything about Augusta?
It was related to the Martha's-Ville anchor mill. I seen that in a newspaper.
Where was it located at?
I don't know that, I just know that it said Augusta and Martha's-Ville on one of the ads that I saw in the newspaper.
I have it on good authority from Vicki Turner that Augusta Anchor Mill was located where Ryan has his shop down there. But
Well-
that's where it's at, along Sarah Creek.
The ticket was for Theodore Mallinckrodt in 1902, I think, or it's laying over there. But we were kind of wondering where the anchor mill was.
Well, we're gonna have to dig into that one.
Well, Janet Burns and her night, she donated the millstones that are in the Bridget Garden, and I heard that they came from down there.
From that anchor mill?
Yeah.
Which would have been across from your house, Ellen. I know, it's interesting.
What is an anchor mill? I don't know.
It was the flour mill.
Wow.
It was just called the Augusta Anchor Mill. It was a flour mill or corn mill or grind mill.
It says flour, meal, and feed stuff.
Flour mill and seed stuff, yeah. That's what, yeah.
So obviously that creek down there must have been bigger than it is now.
Must have been. If it ran a stone, it must have been a little bit bigger than it is now.
Well, it wasn't necessarily water powered though. The guy that owned the one in Martha's-Ville had a patent where he patented some type of a elevator for raising the mechanism and everything. I don't know what all, but.
I do have a picture of one that I got off the internet of it.
Okay.
I'll have to bring that in.
Yeah. I mean, I would like all the information on the things that you donated anyway, just so there's a story that goes with.
I have a board too that goes with spyglass that came off the original boat. It's in the garage of the house.
That's
It's
really
been
neat.
there since Anita put it there.
Well, we've enjoyed doing this, and I don't know whether you can get any of these books anymore, but Anita wrote the book From Knights to Pioneer, and there's a lot of,
I asked Anita about that one time because when I first started spending a lot of time with her, and I wanted to get my own copy, and I went online, and I found several of them, and I bought one for about $12, and it was still in the shrink wrap, and I took it to Anita, and I said, look what I got, I want you to sign it for me. She said that at the time it was published, that all of the people at Mallinckrodt Chemical got a copy of it, and so that's why there are how many out there, and many of those people didn't care about having it, and so a lot of them have sold it over the years. If you go online, a lot of times you can find,
Might be able to find-
sometimes they're hundreds of dollars, and sometimes they're $12.
well, I have not read it. I have not read it, but after Jennifer and I sat down and did a lot of this stuff, I think that I might have to borrow my book.
Borrow it back to you?
It's got a lot of really great stories. I haven't read it cover to cover, but I've read selective.
If you can get through the first 20 chapters of when they're in Germany and you can really figure out who is who, because everybody was named the same and the cousins married here and there, it's great. It's an interesting read. Once you get through that, it's very interesting. You learn that the Mallincrotts were originally Catholic.
No.
Kind of interesting. They were also originally Democrats. They were also split between the North and the South. Emil did have some slaves. I think Julius had one or two. but they were not pro either side. They were Missourians. They were split between the two. And half of our relatives helped burn the armory that sits somewhere close to where St. Peter's and O'Fallon is now. Back in the years when Abraham Lincoln was president and the Civil War was going on. They helped the war cause. They burned one. It's in there.
Yeah, it's an interesting book. I flipped through it. I haven't read it from cover to cover.
It's very fascinating.
Yeah. Was there any other questions? Catherine, I saw your hand go up.
She answered and I wanted to know about the reunion. That was huge.
Yeah, it was really great. It was really, really great. It was a nice reunion. That took a lot of work.
The picture of all of us, all of Dad's families. I sent it to you.
Okay, I'll look for it.
Doesn't matter anymore now.
Is there any other questions from the audience?
I was just curious how many people might be in here that were at that reunion, up in here tonight. That were at the reunion,
Actually, I said, when I came to the reunion then, I think I was sitting almost in this exact same spot on the wheel. Isn't that weird? Another one of those weird meant to be. I'm like, oh my God, I think I really was sitting in the same spot.
So, how many people were there, you know?
At the reunion?
Yeah.
Probably about 150, don't you think?
Oh, I think there was more.
Think there's more?
That, you know what, Dick? There's a picture over there, you can go 1, 2, 3.
They came from Hong Kong and all.
They came from all over, Germany,
From Polynesia.
all over.
I want to get adopted from that one guy from Brazil that had like a 20-bedroom home down there or something.
A what?
He had a 20-bedroom home or something in Brazil.
Yeah, they came from all over. It was a tremendous reunion. I mean, it was like, I don't know, it just was mind-boggling.
Well, when they lived in Germany, the young men, when they wanted to get a trade, they would go to Antwerp, Belgium, to learn a trade. And then, since they were in Belgium, they had to serve in the Belgian army. So that's when they sent these Mallinckrodts over to Polynesia, and one of them married the chieftain's daughter. So there was, at the reunion, there was white, brown, many different colors of Mallinckrodts there.
And how often did that reunion happen? Oh, sorry.
I'm curious when the young people in the town might pick up and bring some of these names back, like Alluth and Rupert.
That reunion happened one time.
Just one time.
The only time.
Oh.
But there have been several Mallinckrodt reunions, mostly held in Fenno Sage at the church.
Still is.
Still is. Another interesting fact, I just thought about this. Dad, Stanley, Hazel, and Audrey all served military. One way or another, either civilian. Dad and Stanley were both in. My grandpa was in. Hazel and Audrey both worked civilian for the military.
Well, that's interesting.
And interesting.
Yeah.
Audrey will be 99.
If she makes it to October, she will be 99.
Wow.
Kind of rooting on her to make it to 100 at this point.
Yeah, why not?
Yep.
So Jennifer, looking at in the future, what are your hopes for Augusta moving forward?
Well, I'd like to see more families move in with young kids who might want to stay here and raise a family here. And my boys were both baptized in this church. Do they go here today? No, but they both moved out. But all the way down the line, my relatives have gone to Ebenezer. It would be nice for the church to grow bigger with fewer people growing into town, and it just needs to get a little bigger.
It could get a little bigger, but we still need to keep
The charm.
and the friendly attitude of Augusta. you
Right.
know. We need to keep it that way because that isn't a unique town. When I moved here 60 years ago, there was 2 grocery stores, 2 taverns, 2 garages, A feed store. What? Blacksmith. And it was just unique to a beauty shop. Well, we still, it was outside the beauty shop, but it was just unique to be able to, I mean, I don't know, you can go down to one grocery store and then walk up to the other one, or go to one tavern or the other. It was just,
You didn't need to leave town.
no.
No, you get gas in town, you get groceries in town, you didn't have to leave.
I've often said that about Augusta, that, you know, I think over the years, the whole idea of coming to Augusta to conduct commerce here has kind of dwindled, because they're, you know, the grocery stores, the gas stations, you know, eventually that kind of fizzled out a little bit. But, you know, Augusta was a hopping place.
Yes, it was.
At one time it was.
Yeah.
You couldn't drive through town in October. You really couldn't. Unless you were Hoobie with, you know, the honey wagon once in a while.
Jan, I have a question.
Okay.
So if you were going to that grocery store, and maybe when Jennifer was a baby, did you take her with you?
It depended on, I would, or a lot of times, I made it so that when Earl was home, he'd watch her. Because at the time Earl started carrying mail, he was home by 11 o'clock.
Okay.
Okay? By the time he ended carrying mail, he didn't get home till 4 or 5 o'clock.
Yeah. Well, because my mom shared with me one day when I had small children, I was like, gosh, how did you do it? I'm like so tired. And she said, oh, when I went to the grocery store in town and you were a baby, I would take you in there and set the little seat up on the counter, and the cashier would watch you while I did my shopping. And I'm like, dang, where are those days?
There was a lot of times.
I don't have it that good.
There was a lot of times that Francis Omley watched me, or Mops watched me, or Mel Thor, I'd be back there with them. You didn't have to fear. Nobody was gonna come take you.
That, no, right,
People
because we're all
watched you.
related anyway.
Yeah. The last thing I'd say about
Talking
me.
about the grocery store, well, I had 6 kids, his wife would call in and opposite them, girl knew what she had, ordered, they'd have it all ready, they'd set it outside out there, and when I got done 8, 9 o'clock on the farm, I'd run in town and pick it up. They would just set outside by the gate there, and we'd pick it up and go home. But you couldn't do it now.
I hear that a-hole voice.
Yeah. Order, we did the same thing. They say order groceries. We did it way back then. We called it in, we got it together, set it outside, and we went there and picked it up.
Butch, I think it was you, I'm not for sure. Earl carried mail. He came home one day and he said, look what was in the mailbox for me. It was a nice summer sausage. Was that you?
No, I don't think I did it. I think Jerry did.
Okay, I said, well, that's really nice. Well, as it turned out, it really wasn't for the mailman, it was for somebody else. Somebody didn't get there. Okay.
Is there anything else you'd like to add, or any other questions?
Jan,
Yeah.
you told me earlier before the start tonight, somebody was still living in the old homestead until 1957? Is that what you said? Which Mallinckrodt was that was still living there?
Earl's mom and dad.
And my dad.
And Earl. Then they moved into town, and they moved to where
Mosley's live now.
Mosley's son, Jason Mosley. They moved there.
They built it.
They built that. But they lived up there till then. And see, the aunts owned the house. Regina and Milani owned the house. And then when they got to the point where they had to do something and whatever, then they asked Earl to take care of their affairs. And then Earl got to buy it. He said, I'll take care of your affairs if you will put in there that I could have first chance at the farm, because I'm farming it and everything. And then they said, well, we'll see, and they did, but, and if the price was right, so we bought it from them then.
You know, at that time when Dad was farming, he was mail carrier, he was farming. In 1972, my other grandma, ran over Mom. Mom was in a body cast from her chest to her ankles. In the living room, or in the dining room of our house in town, Dad mail carried, farmed, took care of me, took care of her. During the day, I think I stayed either at your grandma and grandpa's, or I was up at Hackman's. But Dad was amazing. When you think about what he did and how he took care of all by himself. Because my other grandparents, his mom and dad lived here in town, but the other grandparents lived in Berger. I mean, alone with the help of friends and family and neighbors. It's kind of interesting. I don't remember much other than Elmo saved my life.
What year did he pass?
2019.
2019. So that's the story.
That's the story.
Okay, and we're sticking to it.